for these guys to do an introduction. And then good evening, everyone. I just want to take the opportunity to thank everyone for coming. I'm Kevin Mizikar, I'm the town administrator. As everyone's probably well aware, in 2012, there was a ballot question 3 that was put to all state voters on whether or not to legalize medical marijuana in the state. And that passed by about 60% in favor of it. After that passed, the town, through town meeting, took the initiative to pass some local zoning bylaws that regulate the area where medical marijuana dispensaries are permitted to operate by right. And those areas are basically set up on buffer zones, so you have to locate a dispensary or a cultivation facility within, can't be within 1,000 feet of a number of different types of zones, including residential zones. So that kind of overlays over top of all the zoning within the community. So those laws are our local regulations, and they look back to the state regulations as well, which are very comprehensive and do some prohibitions on where these facilities are allowed to operate, and a whole slew of other regulations on how facilities operate. So over the past, since I've been here for over 2.5 years, the town has been consistently approached by medical marijuana companies with interest in locating here. Most recently, that's picked up with the new governor, who's changed some measures on how licenses are issued to these private nonprofit entities that will operate the facilities. So as the governor expanded the marketplace, the town has seen an increase in interest in businesses locating here. And with that increased business, we've spent a lot of staff time in working with several companies, 2 of them, which are the most farthest through the process in town, are here with us tonight to answer questions that you may have as residents. Further, this process goes through the Board of Selectmen, where these companies go to the board and ask for a letter of non-opposition or a letter of support from the Board of Selectmen in citing a facility in a location within the community, and that is submitted to the state for their siting plan. So the state really wants to know how municipalities feel about having these types of facilities operating. So as the Board of Selectmen has heard most recently from these two groups, they kind of took a step back and said, this is the most mature we've ever been in our process, the most likely we'll have to actually siting a facility in the community. So they said, now's a good time to get some public feedback before they offer their support or non-opposition or other consideration to any of these facilities. So we have, again with us tonight, members from two groups. The first nonprofit organization is Healthy Farms, and they're considering a site on Route 9. And we also have Natural Healthcare Inc. with us, who's considering several sites within the community. And their most frequent conversations with us were along Huntoon Memorial Highway. I think it's probably most appropriate at this time if I turn it over to Doug Belanger, and he has a few comments from the board and or from himself and some procedural things from the meeting.
Thank you, Kevin. As Kevin said, I'm Selectman Doug Belanger, and actually asked us to not, as a board, vote this until we had some public input, and that's really why we're here today. And I thank both the board and you guys for coming, but also the proponents here for agreeing to. They don't have to, and it's a good thing that they're here to answer. So just a couple of kind of overviews here, and that is that one, we're certainly out looking for new business, but we want it to be compatible with our community. And with that, your input tonight, after both companies give their presentation, the representatives here give their presentation, I would ask you as a longtime townie and a longtime selectman that we show them the respect, but we ask the questions we need to ask. You don't have to be politically correct to ask a question, but I would urge that we're polite and respectful. And that's really the only ground rules. Kevin will sort of moderate, but we're here, and again, I urged the company to do this before we proceeded with a vote as the Board of Selectmen. There'll be other levels of this, if it's properly zoned and so on. But the issues tonight are really around your concerns as residents. And before we make a decision as a board, we collectively wanted to hear from you. So hopefully some concerns, rumors, or whatever will be dispelled, and we'll deal with facts. And that's why, again, I thank the companies for coming forward. And I would start with the attorney for Healthy Farms, Valerio Romero.
Drag this back a little bit so you can see both groups a little better without block. Does that work for you? Okay, great. Thank you very much, everybody, for coming out. I appreciate it. My name is Valerio Romano. I am the attorney for Healthy Farms. Healthy Farms was one of the original 100 or so applicants. There were 181 applications in the 2013-14 application process. Healthy Farms went through really a double vetting procedure by the Department of Public Health, and they made it through. And at the end of that process, during 2014, there were 11 groups that made it through the process, and Healthy Farms was one of them. With me, I have Nat Averill and Paul Overgag, who are the principals and founders of Healthy Farms. As Mr. Mizikar explained, these operate as Chapter 180 nonprofits. So a nonprofit doesn't have shareholders. These are the founders and the principals. The money that a nonprofit generates has to be spent for the nonprofit purpose, which is to provide medicine, educational materials, and related products like vaporizers to the patients of the Commonwealth. So these are unfortunately, under federal law, these nonprofits do not get a charitable organization status, although in the 20 years that California has had a medical use of marijuana program, many have applied for that designation with the IRS and been unable to receive it. But we are Chapter 180s under Massachusetts law. Quickly, I want to introduce Nat and Paul to you. Nat has over 20 years of experience in biopharmaceutical manufacturing. Basically, he knows how to build a clean biotech environment. And as I'll get to, that's essentially what this is. This is biotech. This is not growing marijuana and selling bags of pot to people. It's far beyond that. If you look nationwide, infused products constitute about 45% of the sales from a medical marijuana dispensary, and that number is going up depending on where you see it, on where you look, but it's going up and up and up. This is not about patients buying just simply marijuana and going home and smoking joints. This is a completely different market, and it's much closer to biotech, and that's why Nat was originally interested in it and why we have him participating in Healthy Farms. One of the reasons we believe that the Department of Public Health in the first application process brought them through was because we had that extremely valuable experience as part of our team. Also with Nat is Paul Overgag. Paul is also one of the founders of Healthy Farms. He's the CEO. Paul's experience is also fantastic for this. He not only runs 2 restaurants in Cambridge and Harvard Square, one of them being Charlie's Kitchen, which is sort of a famous historical restaurant there, and then the Red House, which is the oldest wooden building in Cambridge, I believe, and Paul can correct me if I'm wrong. It's a beautiful landmark, and in building it out and in developing his restaurant there, he was able to maintain that essential character that made it such a valuable historical building. But on top of that, Paul also runs an organic farm with his 2 brothers in Winchendon, and they supply all the organic foods for his restaurants. So it's a great combination of people. We have an experienced restaurateur who knows how to serve the public, runs a farm, as well as a biotech manufacturing specialist and expert. So it's a great combination to start a dispensary in the Commonwealth. And as I said, out of the 181 applications, there was one of, if you look at applications versus applicants, it's one of 15 applications, 11 applicants that made it through in that 2013-14 process. I don't know if you recall, if you saw it in the press, but that process was quite controversial. Congressman Bill Delahunt, who heart is absolutely in the right place when he was doing this, I think he's since withdrawn himself. Great guy, really wanted to do this for the right reasons, but the Department of Public Health looked at their financing agreements and didn't move them through the process. Ultimately, they won a lawsuit against the Department of Public Health and got put back in the process, but he was really a catalyst for a lot of newspaper articles throughout the Commonwealth. The Boston Globe wrote about it frequently because of the controversial nature of having a former United States congressman participating in the medical use of marijuana program. And so if you look at the caliber of people that were actually made it through the first round, they're beyond reproach. Quick anecdote, I had, in one of my groups, there was a member of the board of directors who got his college degree in 1952 and inadvertently wrote on his resume that he got it in 1954. I had to write a letter of explanation to the Department of Public Health as to that discrepancy. Same college, same degree, 2 years off, 70 years ago, and I had to write a letter of explanation to the department. You can kind of imagine how that letter of explanation went. There wasn't really a lot of substance to it. It was, oh, that was an inadvertent mistake, and the department didn't have a problem with that. But ultimately, the level of scrutiny behind these groups is incredible. And that goes for natural health care too, to have made it, you know, I believe they're in the second phase of the current application process, as is Healthy Farms application. They've been invited to submit the third phase, the siting profile. So, in the second phase, the Department of Public Health does this incredible scrutiny. So they do a Corey, Massachusetts background check of all these groups. Then they do a nationwide and federal background check of every individual, and that includes every individual, and I'll give you a little story about that too. Then they also figure out where you lived in the past. So if you lived in Florida 10 years ago, they'll do a statewide background check in Florida. So they make sure that everybody is absolutely beyond reproach, and that includes making an inadvertent mistake of 2 years on your resume as to when you got your college degree. We have in Georgetown, where Healthy Farms is siting, and they have a registration from the Department of Public Health, there's a mother of a child who has a seizure condition that's amenable to the high CBD form of cannabis. And if you saw, Sanjay Gupta did a special on this, and it was all over. It was all over the news. And there was a little girl named Charlotte in Colorado who had, you know, hundreds of seizures a week, and many children like that in the Commonwealth, virtually catatonic. CBD strain of cannabis actually fixed it. It's incredible. Big Pharma, in all their research, was unable to treat this girl's condition, and cannabis, high CBD, low THC, no psychoactive properties, actually helped this girl, and now she's healthy again. And there's a child like that in Georgetown that we're looking forward to providing medicine to as well. And so that the mother of that child was going to help out a little bit with Healthy Farms. And I asked the department, do I really need to background check this woman? Because she was going to do some Facebook stuff and some social media, because she really wanted to participate and wanted to make sure it happens. And they said, yes, you have to background check everybody. And we can. She has no problems with her background. I wasn't trying to avoid it, but just the level of scrutiny they have. Somebody who's going to edit your Facebook account needs to be background checked. Not just principals and people working there, but it's that level of scrutiny that they have for all these groups, both groups on both sides of me. So, just to give you, that's a little background about the program, about where we are. Currently, there's about 170 applications in front of the Department of Public Health, which is the state agency tasked with registering or licensing these groups. There's about 170 applications out there. You can probably, this is under the Baker administration. On June 29th of 2015, the Baker administration reopened the application process. Of those 170 applications, you could probably throw out somewhere about a third of them because they're just unable to put together the level of team that you need, the level of financing that you need, and the operations plan that one needs in order to get through this. There's a management and operations profile, which is the second stage of the application process that Healthy Farms has made it through and been invited to submit their siting profile. And you have to give summaries of how you're going to do it all, and that includes cultivation, processing, and operating your retail facility. And so you can throw out, 70 or so applications just because they're just not going to be able to get it all through. If you take a look at the numbers from 2014, when there were, 15 dispensaries, depending on how you look at those lawsuits that have nothing to do with these groups, but the lawsuits that were won, 15 or so dispensaries, there's still only 6 open in the Commonwealth. And so only 6 dispensaries open means not enough patient access, just absolutely not enough. And what that means is that under the regulations, there's something called a hardship cultivation registration application, or hardship cultivation registration. When I say hardship, most people think financial hardship. That's being handled by the groups, but there's also a lack of access hardship. And the lack of access hardship means that any current patient in the Commonwealth, and there's about 20,000 of them that have obtained medical use of marijuana cards from the Department of Public Health, any current patient in the Commonwealth right now, today, without informing local law enforcement, without informing the Department of Public Health, although they should be sending in a hardship cultivation registration application to the department, can grow in their house, in their basements, in their closets, totally unregulated. And that's legal in the Commonwealth today because there isn't enough access. And so what happens there is that these people frequently, because there is no access and they're trying to do the right thing and providing medicine for themselves, although it's just typically marijuana that's grown, it's not the level of biotech that these groups will be opening, that Nat has the experience in doing, but they will upgrade their electrical, for instance, without calling the local building inspector, without pulling permits, and that creates fires. It also creates, an opportunity for diversion of cannabis because it's just in a basement or a closet. And so nephews and sons and brothers and sisters will go in and just potentially take some. So one of the main values of citing a registered marijuana dispensary in a community is this eliminating any legal hardship cultivation registrations. The other half of the hardship cultivation registration is a financial hardship. So all the groups, as part of the application process, had to submit a plan to the Department of Public Health as to how they will provide financial assistance to patients who have a verified financial hardship and can't afford medicine. So typically what it is, it's some level of discount depending on how far below the federal poverty line you are. And at that point, these groups will provide just a couple grams to them at a discounted rate. So there's no incentive to go buy an ounce at a super cheap rate and turn around and sell it. It's just not possible. So that brings us to pricing. And I think this is an absolutely valuable part of this because the main concern people have with this program, I think there's very few people don't believe that it helps anyone. I think that ship has sailed. Most people have the idea that it actually does help some people, although there's some argument as to which conditions qualify, and maybe it doesn't help Crohn's disease as much as it helps MS, but there's very few people who don't think that it helps someone. Now the issue then becomes, well, is it only going to those people? And so pricing is a way that we make sure that it only goes to those people. By controlling the price and basically setting it somewhere at the black market level, there's no incentive for somebody to go into a dispensary, and I'm going to talk to you briefly about what it takes to get into one of these places. There's no incentive to go into a dispensary, buy a bunch of marijuana, then turn around and sell it, because that's the same price on the street anyway. You're not making any money. There's no reason to do that. At the same time, you don't set the price too high above the black market level, because then these dispensaries and the medical use of marijuana program fails, because people aren't going into dispensaries and they keep buying cannabis from their cousin Vinny that they've been buying it from, for the last decade. So that's a little bit about pricing, and one of the ways that diversion for non-medical purposes is prevented by these dispensaries in the Commonwealth. I'd like to walk you through what it takes to actually make a purchase of marijuana in one of these dispensaries. So the first thing you have to do is you have to become a qualified patient in the Commonwealth. In order to become a patient, you have to visit a Massachusetts licensed physician, right? So unlike California, where people are getting their certifications or recommendations or prescriptions over Skype and there's no oversight, you have to visit a Massachusetts licensed physician. You also have to be a Massachusetts resident to get that certification from the patient. At that point, you get the certification, then you have to go onto the Department of Public Health website and you have to apply and put in the number that the physician provides you, and they'll send you a plastic program identification card that's issued by the state. So now I'm a patient. I've gotten my program ID card. I've spent money to do that. And then I go to a dispensary. So there's only 6 open in the Commonwealth right now. Most of those are actually selling out of medicine because there's 20,000 patients with only 6 dispensaries helping them. But you go to a dispensary, hopefully one in Leicester if we're fortunate enough to site in this town. Once you get to the dispensary, from the outside, you can't even get in the first door. You have to show a form of identification. Each dispensary will have a security guard or agent on site whenever they're open. There will be a security officer there whenever they're open. And I know Healthy Farms would be eager to get a recommendation from the police chief in Leicester as to who that security guard should be. No problem at all making sure that it's somebody local that the police chief trusts. Very eager and happy to do that. So there'll be a security guard on site. You have to show you show a state-issued identification like a driver's license just to get in the first door. Then if that checks out, and they'll either show it, depending on how it's built, they'll either show it through a camera or through a glass window. Then you get in the first door. You're in like an airlock, man trap, sally port. There's a bunch of words for it, a vestibule. But the point is that you're in a small, sort of an enclosed area, and there's another locked door before you can get in the dispensary. And this is regulatory requirements from the Department of Public Health. I'm not giving you our best case scenario of how security is going to be, and then once we actually site, it's going to be different. This is a requirement from the Department of Public Health. So you get into that second area, and meanwhile, before you got in, you're sitting out. This is New England, and you're outside in February potentially. You can't just walk in that door. You still have to show that identification before you get in the first door. In our Georgetown facility, we petitioned the Department of Public Health to actually build, it's a large facility, it's 65,000 square feet, so we had room. We wanted to build just another little room that just had a front door that patients, caregivers, or people who drove them there could go wait in New England, and no other access, no other doors into the dispensary. The Department of Public Health said, no, that's insecure, you're not allowed to do it. So in New England, patients show up, whoever brings them is waiting in the car or waiting outside. Patient gets in now to this vestibule or man trap. In there, they have to show 2 forms of identification. They have to show a driver's license or other state-issued card, and then the state-issued medical use of marijuana program card. They have to show both of those forms of identification to the security agent that I said is going to be on site all the time whenever they're open. They have to show both those forms of ID. At that point, those forms of ID are checked for a few different things. One, they're checked to make sure that the patient is who the patient says they are, right? So a patient, is this actually Frank Smith? So that's the first and most obvious one. The second one is the program identification valid? Are they still a current medical use of marijuana patient in the Commonwealth? So they'll look at the program ID. Then the last thing they check for is whether that patient has purchased their limit of cannabis in the Commonwealth yet in the 60-day period. The point being that a patient can't go to dispensary X, buy a whole bunch of cannabis, go to dispensary Y, buy more, and stockpile it. They can only buy the limited amount within a 60-day period. Now, in order to make sure that they're doing that, these dispensaries cannot operate unless they have a functioning internet connection by which to access the Department of Public Health centralized database that all dispensaries have to fill in every sale, every record to. So they cannot operate without actually accessing that database. If their internet's down, they're closed. And that's another, everything I'm telling you is a regulatory requirement or a requirement that we're going to work out with. It's all regulatory, but the idea of inviting the police chief to recommend somebody, that's not necessarily in the regulations, but it's something that we'll commit to and we'd be happy to do. So once they're in, they've shown both forms of ID, it checks out that they're a legit patient, they are who they say they are, they haven't bought more than their allotted period for a 60-day supply, then they can get in that second door and they're buzzed in or allowed in through that locked door. Now they're inside the first area of the dispensary. When I say dispensary, I'm talking, so registered marijuana dispensary in the Commonwealth means a bunch of different things. Interestingly enough, it also means cultivation and processing facility. Healthy Farms does not plan on doing that activity in Leicester. They're doing that in Georgetown. It would just be a dispensing or retail facility where patients can come and provide and obtain medicine so we can, in part, end those hardship cultivation registrations. So they finally get, inside that second door. And if it's a first-time patient, there's an intake process. So during the intake process, they actually will go and there'll be a form that they have to sign. Now on that form, there'll be advice about not diverting marijuana to children. There'll be advice about not operating machinery under the influence of marijuana. There'll be advice about how to store cannabis when they get it home. There'll be, and there'll also be other information as required by local police department. Like for instance, a patient who comes, when they leave the facility, would police rather they take one particular route when they leave versus another because the other might take them into a neighborhood that the preference would be to have them drive the other way. So the patient will actually have to sign that form and acknowledge that they've been provided all that information and they'll comply with it. And that form is kept by the groups, by Healthy Farms, in perpetuity. That form stays there. And so we will have that acknowledgement and we'll have that promise from the patient that they will comply with the rules as set forth and all the requirements. So we're going to keep that form indefinitely. Now, if patients, the Department of Public Health has lots of deference to individual municipalities. So if patients are violating any of those rules, we will report it to the municipality, we'll report it to the Department of Public Health. Depending on the violation, a few things could happen. One, the patient will lose their program identification card and they won't be a medical use of marijuana patient in the Commonwealth anymore. Another one, Healthy Farms can take it upon themselves. We don't like the way you've conducted yourself in Leicester and you're not coming back to our dispensary, goodbye. And it seems like a harsh remedy, but the point is that Healthy Farms wants to work very closely with the patients of the surrounding area, but also with law enforcement, fire, building inspector in Leicester to make sure that we're operating the way they want us to operate. So now a patient has acknowledged that they've received all this various information, and then they have the opportunity to make a purchase or to meet with an expert who's been trained in different strains of cannabis and different methods of ingestion. For instance, and this is when the biotech really comes in. For instance, multiple sclerosis is a condition that is absolutely treated well by cannabis. MS is incredible in the relief that patients get from cannabis. For instance, I have had numbers of people over the last couple of years come into my office whose insurance companies are no longer giving Biogen $30,000 a year for infusion treatments, and they've actually slowed the progression of their MS, and are symptom-free. That's how incredible this is when you do it properly. But you don't want an MS patient to come in and simply medicate by buying a bag of pot, right? That's not what this is about. This is about buying consistent quality medicine. So what they do is they actually use supercritical CO2 extraction for the most part. There's other methods of doing it. And they extract the active ingredients, whether it's CBD or THC or CBN or the various terpenes, and they extract the active ingredients and they put them into infused products. Sometimes, depending on the condition, some people need to eat it. Other people might need to take a tincture or a capsule format. Other people might need to use a vaporizer. The absolute incentive is to prohibit or to disincentivize actual smoking of marijuana. That's passé, and it's just not what the program's about, although there are some people who that's the way they have to ingest it. But on that label will be the active ingredients that that particular infused product has. And the important thing here is that a patient with MS, for instance, every time they walk in, they're buying the exact same thing. They're medicating with consistent quality medicine as opposed to just buying a bag of marijuana. And that's really the nice thing that sort of happens with the evolution of the medical marijuana program in this incredibly well-regulated state that the Commonwealth is. And that's the advantage of having a group that really, pretty much most groups that make it through the application process will have that expertise. At least they'll have to show the department they've thought this through. But particularly Healthy Farms has NAT and has this expertise, and there's a plan to do it, and they've already been approved by the department for registration, and now they're going for another one. So you know that Healthy Farms is a fantastic group. So that's that's the medicine. So you're going to meet with a specialist, a patient education manager, and again, love to have any input from the residents of Leicester as to who that should be. You meet with that person, and that person then will either give you some guidance on which strains and which ingestion methods are best for your condition, or you've already done that, or you already know, and then you'll have the opportunity to make a purchase. When you go to make the purchase, you'll go up to the counter, and if you want to see a sample, whether it's an infused product or a flower or whatever, you want to see a sample, it's in a locked glass case. Picture a jewelry store, because that's exactly how the Department of Public Health enforces a purchase. So you want to see a sample, and you will ask the person working at the counter, who's a dispensary agent, been fully background checked. You'll ask them to see a particular sample. They'll actually reach in, unlock, pull out the sample, show it to you. Then you say, oh, okay, that looks great. You'll read the label and say, okay, those are the ingredients that I want, but how about that? That might be better for me. They have to take it, put it back in, go over to the other case, unlock the other case, pull out the sample there, put it on, just like the way a jewelry store works. That's exactly the way this works, and the Department of Public Health enforces that also. So finally, then you make your purchase. When you make your purchase, there's two entries into two databases. There's a seed-to-sale tracking database that the individual RMD or dispensary will operate. That seed-to-sale tracking database will allow them to actually know exactly what location in their cultivation facility any product was purchased. It has barcodes with lot and batch numbers that will record who's actually the person who's actually purchased it. That gets maintained in their database. That information will be available to the Department of Public Health and law enforcement as needed. And then, so there'll be two forms of entry. One, they'll enter it into their individual database with the seed-to-sale tracking software. And then also there'll have to be a second entry into that Department of Public Health database, real-time, live, like I said, no internet connection, no sale. And so they'll enter that into that other database and also do another check at that point for the validity of the certification or the patient's identification, as well as whether they purchased the limit or not. So now we have basically, three checks. We have an acknowledgement of the security and safety rules, all signed. And at that point, the patient, when they complete their purchase, will have to leave. There is absolutely no on-site consumption allowed at these dispensaries. No one's going to be using marijuana in them. No one's going to be using marijuana around them. The on-site security guard will make sure nobody's loitering outside of one of these places. If somebody makes their purchase, they get in their car and they leave. This is not going to be a hangout spot. This is absolutely not part of it. If Leicester Police Department were to tell the Department of Public Health that Healthy Farms had patients just loitering in their parking lot, maybe one strike from the Department of Public Health, but there's just way too much thought, time, money, and access to patients. It's a value that goes into this for any of these dispensaries or any of these groups to risk any of that. So no one's loitering, no on-site consumption. At that point, they have to leave. Now, inside the dispensary, it's actually divided up into two main areas, although there's further areas in that. There's the front of the house where all the stuff I just talked about happens. The patient consultation, you'll have an extra little office for the patient to sit in with whoever's giving the consultation. That's where the acknowledgement happens of all the rules that the dispensary has that relate to the regulations and the local community's rules. That's where the sale and the purchase happens. That's the front of the house. Now the back of the house is a whole nother story. That's where it's really quite secure. It's especially secure. Beyond the 2 doors and all that, patients can't get into the back of the house. That's where you'll have some people who work in the inventory. When a patient makes a purchase, they'll get that purchase from the either from the counter or from the back of the house if it is, and they'll pass it through a cubby. There's no opportunity for a patient to get in. In the back of the house, there's also a vault room. Now, typically in the dispensaries that my office and we've cited, and out of the 12 groups, depending on how you look at it, that made it through the process the first time, I personally brought 4 of those groups through the process, Healthy Farms being one of them. My law partner in the new application process, he personally brought another 4 groups through the process. So if you look at it, 12 groups with current registrations. My law partner and I, we brought 8 of them through the process. So what I'm telling you, this is the way it works. So there's the back of the house, and in the architectural and security review that you have to do with the Department of Public Health, you have to build this vault room. And the vault room typically so far has been concrete cinder block reinforced with rebar, right? So nobody's getting in that vault room. In that vault room, you're also going to have 2 large heavy safes that are bolted to the ground. No one's dragging a safe out of the vault room. In those safes, one of them you're going to store cash, and one of them you're going to store product for that day or 2 until you make another delivery from your cultivation and processing facility in our case, or if you're co-located like some other dispensaries. You're going to store all those 2 things in that vault room. There's going to be very limited access to that vault room. The cash that patients spend is going to be frequently swept. So you're not having lots of cash sitting in the front of the house. It's frequently swept and brought into that vault. And you think cash business, I think if you look at this, there's a lot of talk about banks not operating in this sphere and banks not taking these deposits. Fortunately, Massachusetts, a bank stepped up, Century Bank, and they are in fact taking these deposits. So that cash will be brought up to Century Bank frequently, and there won't be a lot of cash stored there. So when you think about the cash issue, the idea is, well, is somebody going to rob one of these dispensaries, right? That's the issue. So if you think about the security, about getting in, showing the 2 forms of ID, getting through the man trap, getting past the security guard, there's a lot easier places in any community for somebody to stick up. There's liquor stores, there's Walgreens, there's markets. There's a lot easier place for somebody to rob. It's just simply, and there's 6 open dispensaries right now. And so far, I know for the first 4, and the other 2, they're brand new, so I haven't seen any data, but the first 4 have had 0 crime, 0 traffic accidents, 0 issues. And this is out of the mouths of those police chiefs. There has not been one issue. Now, granted, in Massachusetts, dispensaries have only been open since June of last year, but I also am a lawyer in California, and we've had a medical use of marijuana program there for 20 years, and it's totally different. Massachusetts is just this incredibly regulated program. One of the ways, so to finish up with the security, that vault room is going to be there. Limited access. There's also a security room where you're going to actually store your security equipment. That's servers and everything, storing all your camera footage and everything else. That security room needs to have floor-to-ceiling cages where that equipment is stored, and only the necessary people can actually access it. There's no reason for your inventory manager or anybody but maybe your security guard and your CEO or COO to ever access that. Finally, the other level of security is that every single inch of these places is monitored by a camera. There are cameras all around the outside. There are cameras all throughout the inside. All that footage is stored for at least 180 days. All that footage will be available to the Leicester Police Department. Now, we've met with the police chief here, and having spoken with him and many other chiefs, and he's the one who had this great idea. Most of the time, they don't want to waste a dispatcher sitting and looking at that footage, as if it's a school or something. They frequently have, live feeds to the schools inside the police department. They don't want to waste that on us. But if there is an incident, and we hope there isn't, and there hasn't been so far, in the event that there is, we will open up, or one will be available to them, a live feed from all the cameras in our dispensary. So as dispatch is heading to the registered marijuana dispensary, they can look, and they can look in the vault room. They can look in the front of the house, and they can see, is there really a holdup? What's going on? Was it a false alarm? Who knows? We don't know, but they can see on their way there. So we'll make all these cameras available to them as much or as little as they want. And then we talked about the outside security cameras, all there as well. So that's, you know, sort of the rundown of how one of these things is secured and the life of a patient. We've talked about how cannabis is cultivated to some extent, but the most important part of that was the processing and the biotech aspect of this. So that's sort of the rundown of how one of these dispensaries operates. It's also something of an explanation of what Healthy Farms is and who they are and how they've made it through this incredibly difficult, thorough vetting background check process. And if you're going to pick a group, and this is not, we're not here to be adversarial with natural health care at all. I mean, it's just not the way I do this. But if you're going to pick a group, and you know, I am their lawyer, so you know, you might take this with a grain of salt. You can't really pick a better group than these guys. They have the experience. They've been vetted by the department for 2 years. In Georgetown, we've obtained a letter of support or non-opposition. We met with the police chief there multiple times. He sent letters to the planning board. We actually got a special permit in Georgetown. We're moving forward. So these guys have been vetted up and down by municipalities, by the Commonwealth. Healthy Farms is a fantastic group, and they want to be, you know, a responsible corporate citizen and part of the community. I want to talk a little bit more about why right now is the time to cite one of these in your community. We talked some about the hardship cultivation registration application process and the fact that right now any patient can just grow in their basement. And I can tell you with almost certainty, even in a small town like Leicester or hereabouts, there's some people doing that. But moreover, right now in the application process, and you know, there's you're supposed to obtain this letter of support or non-opposition from the selectman or the town manager, and this is the time to have it so that the people who are in front of you are these thoroughly vetted people, are people that will be absolutely transparent with law enforcement, are people that will take the time to have these meetings. Otherwise, what's going to happen in a year or two, when that letter of support requirement or part of the process, because it's not a regulatory requirement. There is nowhere in the regulations that requires a letter of support or non-opposition. It's part of the application process. In a year or two, when that part of the application process falls off, it won't be Healthy Farms, and I doubt it will be Natural Health Care, but what it will be is another group from Colorado with no ties to the community whatsoever is going to hire the best zoning attorney in these hereabouts, and they're going to come in and they're going to cite one, and there's nothing anybody's going to be able to do about it. And unfortunately, right now, you have groups in front of you that will work with you to, you know, virtually any extent necessary to make sure that they're citing it in a responsible manner because of this letter of support or non-opposition portion of the application process. Even if they get the letter of support or non-opposition, it doesn't mean they're just necessarily opening right away. They still have to get a provisional registration from the Department of Public Health. They're still going to work with your local law enforcement. We met with your health department, your police chief, your fire chief, your building inspector, your town manager. We've done everything. We've been in front of the Board of Selectmen. They're still going to work with the town on citing it. They're still going to work with the town on finding out what the bullet points in that acknowledgement form for patients are. They're still going to work with the town on making sure that quality food for infused products is sold there. So now's the time to ensure that the groups that are in front of you aren't just ramming it down your throat because it's zoned and it has to be zoned, and the Attorney General has said unequivocally that it has to be zoned, or it goes into an existing zoning district. Now's the time to allow one of these groups in. Finally, just to talk a little bit about what the dispensary is going to look like. The outside of the dispensary, you're not able to see into the dispensary, not able to see any marijuana products in the dispensary. When we talked about Paul maintaining the oldest wooden building in Cambridge and maintaining the facade and the look and feel and making sure that Cambridge was happy with it when he opened his restaurant in Cambridge, it's the equivalent thing here. The building and the location, the building that we intend to site in is only really half built, but we're going to make sure that it's something that the residents and the citizens can be proud of. It's going to be a beautiful facade. It's going to be a well-maintained building. The only people that are going to know that a dispensary there are the people that have been following this process and the 1–2% of the population that these dispensaries serve. No one else is going to know that it's there. There are no, on the outside of the building, there's no pot leaves. There's no indication of marijuana. There's no colloquial terms for marijuana. There's nothing weed. All you can say on the outside is your logo, which can't have a medical symbol or a marijuana symbol on it. Theirs is a red barn, which is quite unobtrusive, doesn't call to mind marijuana, and the name of the company. That's all that can be on the outside of the building. So when you drive by, It's not like you look in Colorado and you see these neon flashing pot leaves after dark, and it's like this whole, it's almost like we're in Amsterdam, you know, it's absolutely not like that in the Commonwealth, and these are regulatory requirements for how it has to run. So the outside of the building is going to be maintained in such a way that people in Leicester can be happy that it exists there. The group that's doing it is one that is absolutely invaluable, has been vetted thoroughly, and the process for doing it is one that we have fantastic people running. So with that, I'm going to check with Nat and Paul to see if there's anything else that I missed, and otherwise I'll turn it over to Natural Healthcare. But I'm going to be sitting here, and I don't think there's anybody in the Commonwealth, in fact I know there isn't, who knows more about this process, about the registration process and opening one of these than I do, so I'll still be here to answer any questions that may come up as we move forward. Give me one brief second and I'm going to check with Nat and Paul. All right guys, so I'm going to turn it over to Natural Healthcare and let's move forward.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Rob Lally. I'm with Natural Healthcare. I'm here tonight with Randy Lamatina and Sam Barber, some of the principals of Natural Healthcare, and also Steve Barber, who couldn't be here tonight. Randy is over 35 years of experience in the law enforcement. He's a Boston police detective on the bomb squad in the Air Force, and will be our head of security. Steve Barber and I, we were involved with, we brought the first casino to the state of Maine, and so when we talk about highly regulated environments, I would say cannabis and casinos have probably the most oversight, the most regulation, the most background checks of anything that any process that you can imagine going through. Steve and I did that, and we've been business partners for almost 10 years now. I want to congratulate Healthy Farms. Really, Paul and Nat, we've met before. These guys are fantastic. When Valerio talks about the process, I got into this business over 4 years ago while Massachusetts was just starting their application. The application process in Massachusetts and in other states, it is amazing the level of detail. If you were to see the applications that are submitted, I kid you not, they're 4 feet off the floor. And so congratulations for making it in the first round, guys. It really is truly amazing. And Valeria, I was going to say this, but you said it yourself. There is nobody in the state of Massachusetts that knows more about this process than Valerio. I've known him now for almost a year, and he has worked on more applications and really is the best in the industry. So we're pretty honored to be up here with these guys because they really are fantastic. And I talked to the guys in Georgetown. They have a wonderful facility right off the highway, and the town planner there had nothing but great things to say with you. And we met with you a while ago, and really, it's nice to see we're in great company. And I will tell you, for a lot of these groups that are in this business, the security, the background checks, and the scrutiny that you see as part of this process, it's tremendous, and we all know it as much as anybody. So, again, we're really excited to be here tonight. We want to thank all of you for coming as well, and we know you're taking time out of your night to come here. As we look at this process, this is something that we like to do and come out and meet with the folks. As I mentioned, 4 years ago, we were involved in the process, and since that time, we have opened up, we have a license in the state of Nevada, which is a grower process, and a dispensary license, which we're building out right now. I also am part of a group in the state of Washington. In the state of Washington, we're the third largest producer processor. There's about I think a little under 500 producer processors in the state of Washington, and we've just seen such a tremendous growth in the industry, and we really see Massachusetts as being one of the great places to be. That, again, we believe in the regulated marketplace and making sure there's safe access to cannabis. And we've been here before in front of, we've met with the select board, we've talked to the police chief, the fire chief, met with some local people, you know, meeting some of the community here. It's great to see the Cole family here tonight, and Lisa in the back. And we know that cannabis as a medicine works, and I think a lot of people here understand that as well. And as long as it's administered in a very regulated and compliant fashion, and Valerio gave you all the reasons how the state will ensure that, but so will the principals here at Natural Healthcare. We understand regulated environments. We're currently in 2 other states providing cannabis to a very regulated environment without any issues in the past, and we hope to be able to come here and do the same in the town of Leicester. So we are in the process of looking for a location. We have a couple locations that we are looking at that we like, and we think it's really important to start with the town. And that's what the process that we've heard about a couple years ago, I think this new process that the state has implemented has really been important. It's put a lot of that control back where it should be, and that's at the local level in the town. These are, we're a company that we'd like, a nonprofit that would like to come here to Leicester, but ultimately, this is where we want to be. We want to be a part of that community. And so I think when they redid the regulations this last time around, giving each town and city the right to offer that letter of support or non-opposition really gives that control to each and every town. And really what we're doing is we're coming in, introducing ourselves to the folks here in Leicester, and then trying to let you understand who we are. Hopefully, we want to be a part of this community, and we'd be looking for a letter of support once we find a location. So, again, we really look forward to being here and answering any questions you might have, and I'll pass this along to whoever's next. Kevin, thanks.
So I just wanted to take the opportunity to again thank the representatives from Natural Healthcare and Healthy Farms for being here. Now it's your turn. So any questions, concerns, comments? We have staff here as well. Michelle Buck, the town planners, is here to help with any questions that you as residents may have about where these businesses are permitted to operate. We're here to answer your questions and stay as long as you would like us to. So if you have anything, please come to the microphone in the center and ask away.
I have a question. You're both nonprofits. How does that affect your tax status in the town? If you have a farm, are you going to be zoned farming? Are you going to be, because the land you're looking at is industrial, which is taxed different than farming.
So I can speak about the tax status for both groups, and then they can talk about whether they're seeking an agricultural exception or how that works. But first of all, so unfortunately, cannabis is currently a Schedule I controlled substance under federal law. So the fact is that takes an act of Congress to change. The definition of a Schedule I controlled substance is a substance that has no currently accepted medical value and has a high instance of abuse. So cannabis, we know, has accepted medical value. I think the abuse issue can be debated, but I don't think it matters because one of the prongs simply is not met. It has an accepted medical value. So unfortunately, it's a Schedule I controlled substance. So we will continue to pay full share of property tax, despite the fact that we're a Chapter 180 nonprofit. We're not a 501c3. The IRS has consistently declined to give that designation to any cannabis business throughout the United States in the 20 years since 1996 when they started opening up in California. So we actually contribute to the tax base on a commercial level, and we'll continue to do that. Let's say that I'm not holding my breath for it. I'm not really holding my breath for Congress to do much of anything these days, but particularly rescheduling cannabis. But let's say that they did reschedule it and it became a Schedule II controlled substance, and this nonprofit was able to go and seek a 501c3 designation. We commit to the town right now to continue paying that property tax even after that happened. So we do not adversely affect your tax. we do not adversely affect your tax roll in any way. In fact, we will continue to pay a commercial tax base, which hopefully, depending on how it works here, will set off the residential tax base some.
Yeah, and thanks for Larry. Natural healthcare also, I mean, I agree with everything that you said, and we are also be looking to pay our fair share of the taxes here in the town. We have, I had heard about the agricultural exemption, and I don't believe it applies. We certainly will not apply for it. And my understanding, it's something that's different. This town has actually put out its own zoning, has its own laws, regulations, and zoning map, and I don't think anybody in the state could skirt that using agriculture exemption.
Thank you.
Natural healthcare, could you please elaborate on the grow facility you're proposing? Like the area of plants you're going to be doing, how many lights, the electricity, the venting, security measures?
Hello. Yeah. So we're still looking for a location. We have been looking down on Huntoon, as Kevin had mentioned. There are some facilities we're very interested in. I can tell you about our facility that we have, for instance, out in Washington. We would model it after that. So in the state of Washington, we have a 35,000 square foot facility. It is made up of 20 indoor grow rooms. It has we like Healthy Farms would use a CO2 supercritical oil extraction machine to extract the oil from that. Every single inch of the facility has camera and security, has the dead man operation so that you can't come in or go out without identification or being signed in, has the vault, has the dry rooms, and so we're using the Eden Labs 5-liter supercritical machine there. We use a combination of sodium and LED lighting, primarily LED lighting. We think that there's a huge energy efficiency there. So generally looking about, 1,500 amp service is what we have in Washington. So we'd be looking to be doing something similar to that here. So did I miss anything?
So for the venting, is there noise associated with the venting? Is there noise associated with the transformer?
So we're in an industrial park there, and we have direct abutters. We're actually in a building with a Fortune 500 company, and so there's absolutely no outside noise, outside odor, or extra. We found that there's been absolutely no complaints from any of the neighbors due to sound, odor, activity, anything. So we've been a pretty good neighbor there.
You abut a company or you abut residents?
So in this situation, we abut other industrial companies.
Okay, so no residents.
No, and we wouldn't look at a facility that directly abuts a residence.
So no one would be there at night, right? Does the venting run 24/7?
Yeah, the operation would run 24. I mean, there's mechanical equipment that would run 24/7.
I'm noticing some people over here aren't able to hear your questions, and I think they're really valuable, so if you want to use the mic.
So their question was whether or not the venting would run at night, and yes, the vents would run at night, the transformers would run at night. But again, we're not looking to locate directly next to a residential where that would be an issue. The odor's not an issue. Sound hasn't been an issue.
Would that be a dispensary as well, or simply growing?
So what we would like to do again, this depends on where we end up, but we're looking to do home delivery. We're not looking to do, on Huntoon, we would do no on-site dispensing. So you wouldn't have the traffic and anybody coming in to actually purchase product on-site.
When you mentioned the traffic coming in, what type of foot traffic do you get as far as number of customers a day?
So it's a great question, and it's unfortunately a difficult one to answer. When in 2013 there was a cap of 35 dispensaries to be opened across the Commonwealth. A minimum of one per county was the mandate by the voters in 2012, and a maximum of 5 per county with a max of 35 for the Commonwealth. That cap that most people heard about actually evaporated at the end of 2013. So right now the Department of Public Health is free to cite as many as they want. And they've said that they will cite the quality, competent applicants, as well as ones where the towns are willing to have them. So it's tough to know. So Worcester famously has been in the paper for having a whole bunch of people scrambling to get into Worcester. That's fairly close to here. It's tough to know exactly how many are going to be around here. With that being said, we think, probably 25 people at a low end, 100 people at a high end per day, and I know that's sort of a wide range, but that's, it's unfortunately kind of the best answer I can give you without knowing what other companies have moved forward and where they've moved forward in the process. So I hope that helps to answer. It's not exactly precise. It became very difficult to do financial modeling and all that stuff after the application process opened up in June of last year, given that we just simply don't know how many there are going to be and where they're going to be.
And so your rough maximum of 100 per day, what type of operating hours would that be for?
So we would obviously work with the town on doing that. The max operating hours I've heard anywhere in the Commonwealth are 8 to 8. We wouldn't be open later than that or earlier than that. I think what we would do is initially have different hours of operation on different days, so that and sort of have them rather constricted, so that we could eventually expand hours if needed. The last thing you want to do is have a patient who consistently comes in at 8:30 on Tuesday morning, and then all of a sudden you've contracted your hours and you're no longer able to serve that one patient, and that makes people quite frustrated, particularly people who are sick, and that's when they're able to get their medicine. So the absolute outside hours would be 8 to 8, and we would initially start at a more contracted number and expand them if the patient population so required.
One last question.
Of course.
You mentioned other sites that you've worked on in towns. Could you tell us some of the towns that you cited these in?
So I've worked very closely with the mayor of Quincy on opening that one. Councilor Palmucci in the 4th Ward was very ahead of the game, and they had one of the first bylaws that we worked with. We're cited on Raschuti Drive in Quincy. The cultivation will be beginning soon. We worked with Dennis to open there. They're still working out various issues. We got a letter of support in Plymouth for a cultivation-only facility. Worked closely in Deerfield, for instance. I've met with the police chief on many occasions in Deerfield. We have a letter of support or non-opposition from the selectmen there for a co-located facility in this new application round. Fairhaven, worked with Fairhaven, that's Coastal Compassion, one of the original 2014 registration holders. There are more, and I'm sorry, so in the new application round also, Southborough, got a letter of support and non-opposition from Southborough, Medway, Millis, there are so many, and there's a lot more letters in towns that we've worked with, whether it's getting a special permit, like, Southborough, Georgetown, Dennis, whatever it is, we've sort of done it all over the state. I hope that helps to answer, certainly.
I have a few questions, but one of the biggest ones I'm concerned about is, I'm not saying it will, I'm not saying it won't, but should there be an increase in crime in the town, hypothetically speaking, what type of financial contribution or reimbursement is going to go to the town for the increased budget that they're going to be spending on increased crime? And also, should our property values go down due to increased crime, is there some type of financial contribution to the taxpayers if my property values should go down?
Let's both answer this one. I'll take the first stab at it. So first, I'm going to answer your second question first. Okay. So if you look at property values, particularly residential property values, which is my guess as maybe what your inquiry is, but could be both. If you look at property values, and we picture Denver, for instance. Denver is one of those cities with the flashing neon pot signs after dark and whatnot. Property values there since the marijuana program have skyrocketed. The property values are out of hand. It costs far more to buy a house now in Denver than it did 10 years ago. Far more. They've skyrocketed. The actual data on property values is such that in community after community, property values consistently don't go down. And I'd be happy to leave you my card and send you data on that, no problem. So it's not something that happens. Again, also crime. Crime, of course the perception is there that crime goes up. Like we talked about, it's a lot easier to rob a liquor store, a Walgreens, a supermarket than it is one of these places. Study after study has shown that crime, in fact, does not increase. In Los Angeles, the police chief, this is LA, this is not, until the end of last year, there's virtually no regulations on the medical use of marijuana program in California. The governor just signed 3 bills which are regulating it finally. But in Los Angeles, the police chief has said that crime banks are more likely to get robbed, banks, than dispensaries. When you compare what we are selling, what they would be selling, which is infused products and medicine to patients, 1 to 2% of the population, compare that to what a Walgreens has in the back of a Walgreens, 80 milligram OxyContins without a security guard in sight. These dispensaries do not contribute to crime, and there's studies that show that. They've taken a look at the history of crime in a neighborhood before a dispensary opens up and afterwards. Leicester's a beautiful community, so this is not really an issue here, but if you look at some communities, there's that sort of broken windows theory. These places are going to be meticulously maintained with security guards, with a security guard and cameras outward facing and capturing everybody who comes and goes. These actually contribute to an incredibly safe environment. If there is an impact to law enforcement where it's increased cost to law enforcement, we can't call it an impact, because impact fees actually been judged by the Commonwealth to be akin to a tax, and unfortunately that takes an act of the legislature. But we will certainly work with the Board of Selectmen on making sure that if there is any increased cost to law enforcement, that will be covered by Healthy Farms. So this is being recorded. I'm making that pledge. It absolutely will be. So if there in fact is that increased cost, which we really don't foresee, and the nationwide data does not bear out, and Massachusetts is a far more regulated program than just about the rest of the country. If there is such an increased cost, Healthy Farms will absolutely work with local law enforcement to figure out what it is and make sure that that's covered. No doubt about it.
But what about me as a property owner? I'm saying in the hypothetical situation, I lose 10% of my property value. And then the town, because then they're going to get less tax revenue because the property's values went down. So they're getting less property value. So will you then compensate me for my 10% reduction should that happen?
You mean will Healthy Farms write you personally directly?
What I'm concerned about is my property value go down, okay? I moved here from Worcester because I wanted to move to a nice town. And I invest in my home. I want to ensure that I'm concerned that my property value is going to go down. And I know you're saying, hey, listen, it's not what we've seen in the past, but what type of recourse are on our part? What way are you going to support the taxpayers and the citizens of this town should our property values go down?
So, working on financial agreement with the town is absolutely something that, is in the purview of the Board of Selectmen and the town manager to work out with the various groups. If the question is specifically, will Healthy Farms be writing you directly a check if your property value goes down? I'm going to tell you that they're probably not going to, but I'm also going to tell you that I want to send you the information directly on point on this issue that will hopefully allay your fears, because it is just unfounded that property values are going to go down. It just has not turned out that way. They actually go up incredibly, and in fact, what they're going to be doing is they're taking a location right now that is a half-built building that's not, I'm not even sure what its situation is on the tax rolls. I'm sure some property owner is paying something there, and they're going to be paying property tax there. So in fact, you're going to have a commercial tax base that's going to increase, and it's going to ultimately lower your residential tax base, assuming that Leicester operates like most other municipalities that I've been in. So they're actually going to contribute to the commercial tax base and help out. And I put my cards here. I'm eager to send you that information because I don't want to have concerned citizens about this issue. We want to make sure that this is a total cooperative effort, that we're going to be completely transparent and open. So I'm going to show you lots of information, particularly out of Denver, where this issue has been addressed. And Denver is a place where it's just, these things are ugly. No one's even going to know that there's a medical marijuana dispensary there, except for the 1 to 2% of the population that needs the medicine.
Why are you picking Leicester, out of curiosity? Why not the farm, the cultivation farm in a very remote location why is the actual dispensary here in Leicester as opposed to, let's say, Worcester, where you have a much higher population, much larger customer base? Why is it here?
Do you have any experience with property values and stuff where you all agree?
Yeah, I have to, well, I agree with what Valerio is saying. I think the studies will show that, in fact, property values have gone up both on the residential and the commercial side. So the tax base, I believe, will grow and not go down. And I understand where you're coming from. We dealt with this a lot with the casino as well. And everybody thought that there was going to be crime and property values were going to go down. I can tell you emphatically with, because I see it and I know it, property values did not go down, they went up, and the crime went down. And so you found, this is extremely regulated. We talked about, the Walgreens down the street. We have more security than anything, we will have more security than anyone in the town.
Is security armed?
And I don't think so. Is it armed?
Is security armed?
No.
No.
Yeah, not in ours either. No, and so the other thing that we've talked about too is as far as the medicine, it's very tightly controlled. So it's not as if there's going to be medicine getting out and then being sold on the black market. In fact, what I would expect is the black market would dry up, and that would eliminate some crime right there. The other thing I look at is that we haven't talked about. Our facility in Washington employs over 35 people, good paying jobs, and I think that having good jobs here, I'm not sure what your numbers are, but we're probably going to create, if we both were to site here, 50 jobs. And I think that's a good, people are going to come here, they're going to spend money, there's ancillary money that gets spent, people are going to eat here, they're going to shop here if they work here. And we know that we would, in any town that we go to, we always like to give local preference to the people of the town, and we would promote hiring as many people from the town that we could.
Why are you picking Leicester?
I like Leicester. I think it's a fantastic place. Why not?
So we took a look at, first of all, Worcester is competitive in a way that Healthy Farms did not want to participate in. Leicester, it was an opportunity to serve the same patient population. If you take a look at the map of the Commonwealth where dispensaries are currently open, there's a giant hole in the middle of the Commonwealth where there's virtually no patient access. So Healthy Farms felt that without engaging in the Worcester local siting process, they could nonetheless help the patients in this area. That's one. They were able to find a location that fit zoning. It's incredible, but the zoning in many cities and towns, including Leicester, is very sort of exclusive, not in the sense that it's just high value properties, but there's just very few options for where you could site. And we worked the very first day with your planner and with your town manager and trying to figure out, which locations the town would be amenable to having it. They gave us a list of, a couple, 3 locations, and we went and attacked the very first one, and were able to enter into a binding agreement on it. So we found a location that fit with your zoning, that there's a great patient population, and then frankly, just driving through Leicester is a pleasant experience, and we want to be able to serve the people of the town and of the surrounding environment. And Healthy Farms will not do anything to change that pleasant experience. In fact, they'll add to it. On the tax base and the economy issue, there was recently a Forbes article, and I can send you that too if you'd like. Help me remember, that showed that there's $3 to $4 of downstream additional economy for every dollar spent in a medical marijuana dispensary, and that's either service providers and building it out, or keeping it maintained, or hiring local people, or in fact people who might not otherwise shop in your local shops will be shopping there and buying food. So it's a boon to a municipality where it's sited and done properly. And Healthy Farms and both groups, they're not going to be able to get open unless they do it properly. We know that we can do it. We've already been vetted, by a town, by the state. We're that far along. But any group's going to really do it in a way. We might just do it a little bit better. But I can tell you with certainty that this is not something you're going to be pleased, and this is something that is a boon and a good thing for a community in the long run.
You said they can't use it on the site, but what's to stop them from going down the street onto my street and doing it there? Are they going to have the medical marijuana cards revoked if they get caught doing that?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
And they're also going to get, so there's nothing for one of these businesses that eliminates, you know, regular recourse that any resident or citizen of the Commonwealth has, right, or law enforcement. In fact, in the law that was passed by the voters, they created 2 new crimes. So in Massachusetts, we have incredibly relaxed marijuana laws in Massachusetts. It's kind of absurd. I live here, but I've lived here for years, but I also am an attorney in California. Our marijuana laws in Mass are even more relaxed than California. You can possess 50 pounds with possession with intent to sell and wind up with no jail time, right? You can get a misdemeanor or even a quaff, right? With 50 pounds of marijuana possessed with intent to sell. They created 2 new crimes in 2012, a 6-month jail time for any patient who diverts it for non-medical purposes, and a 5-year crime for if these guys are selling marijuana out the back door. So yes, it's incredibly rigorous. If a patient is caught using marijuana, pulled over on the side of the road, we will report them to the Department of Public Health so fast, and we'll be able to know who they are, because inside their car, when they pull over to the side of the road and your police chief or one of your law enforcement officers stops them, will be a bag of marijuana with a barcode on it, and we'll know exactly when they bought it, exactly how much they bought, exactly who bought it. So whoever in the car is the person responsible for doing that. That 6-month jail time is there. They're going to lose their medical ID, their medical marijuana program identification card, and they will not be ever allowed back in Healthy Farms.
Now, you mentioned the background check for the employees, but the people that are getting these marijuana cards, is there a check done on them to make sure that they haven't had prior drug offenses prior to them getting authorized medical marijuana card?
No, so under the laws of the Commonwealth, there is not to be any punishment for being a medical use of marijuana patient. So I think it's safe to say that there's sick people who can benefit from the medicine who have a prior criminal history. That being said, if you're on probation for a marijuana sales related offense, or even possession, if you're on probation for that, your probation officer, and I've dealt with this in a number of courts now, will not allow you to participate in the program, and they'll violate your probation and you're going to go back into custody. So if you're on probation for a medical use of marijuana offense, there's a direction out of BMC, Boston Municipal Court, and the judges have given direction to all the probation departments and all the other judges in the Commonwealth who are like, what do I do with this issue? They've given very clear direction. So somebody who has a history of selling marijuana, is on probation for it, is not going to get to go into these dispensaries and buy marijuana, because they're going to get violated. So it's either back in custody or lose their medical marijuana status. So I hope that helps to answer it. But no, the law is clear that, you know, any patient who can benefit is able to benefit.
Okay, thank you. Sir.
I've met with the police chief a couple of times already, and I find him to be an extremely capable and qualified gentleman with only the interest of this town in his heart. And if he thought for one moment that either of our entities were going to bring an increase of crime into the community, he would have gone to the city council, and the city council would not have us sitting here tonight. So we've looked at this, and everything that Dave said is true. There's no increase in crime, believe me. As a matter of fact, if we remember Prohibition, everybody shot the world up for alcohol. When Prohibition ended, you didn't have to shoot anymore. But the chief has got a good handle on it, and if he thought for one moment that either of our companies were going to bring any crime into his city, we would not have been sitting here tonight.
Okay, thank you.
I'm just being a Boy Scout and holding a spot for Lisa.
Hi, my name's Lisa Cole, and I wanted to introduce myself and my daughter, Madison. She is 7 years old, and our medical cannabis journey started shortly after the ballot measure passed. For the past 2.5 years, we've been on the front lines at the State House advocating for medical cannabis as a treatment to treat her intractable epilepsy. She has failed 11 pharmaceutical drugs, the ketogenic diet. And most recently, we were in a clinical trial for a drug called Epidiolex, which is a derivative of the marijuana plant. And unfortunately, that was unsuccessful for us. It has always been my belief that she required a whole plant-based medicine because of all the terpenes and all the other components of the cannabis plant being there. I'm very excited because I think for the first time this fall, she became a legal patient in the state of Massachusetts, and I got to meet my daughter for the first time after 6 years. So I have a vested interest in this, and I would love to have you in our community. Right now, I have to drive 2 hours round trip to get access to a 30-day supply of medicine. On that trip, my daughter could have 50 seizures. So it's very troublesome trying to plan those trips, trying to find somebody to help me so that she is attended to and with somebody in the back of the car in case she does have a seizure. So I want to know specifically what your plans are to provide medicine to the pediatric community, like my daughter Madison, and especially given some of the regulations that you guys are required to follow. There are highly specialized strains that we use with pediatrics. Most of them are high in CBD. So I'm really curious on how you are able to, locate those specific strains, given the fact that you're required to grow from a seed, and a lot of those strains don't have seeds available. So it's kind of a multi-part question. I apologize.
No, that's great, and yes, really. Thank you. Hi, Madison. So we're I think I talked a little bit about it. Healthy Farms is already dealing with this exact issue in Georgetown, and we have absolute plans. We will be providing, and we've committed to that, to provide high CBD strains like Charlotte's Web or Harlequin. There's a number of them, and Healthy Farms we have 65,000 square feet to grow in. We are going to dedicate grow space to high CBD strains, and in fact, I've been asked to make sure that all my clients spend the time, the money, and the effort to do that, because that's a large part of how this program is legitimate. So we've committed to that to the family in Georgetown, and there's no reason why we won't commit that to your family as well. Absolutely. So we will. There's no doubt. Yeah, absolutely. So I hope that helps to answer it. We have the square footage, we have the will, and we know that it really helps people. So we're right there, and we will in fact do it. And
yeah, I mean, if you look at the folks up here, this is why we got into this business, and this is, for patients like your daughter Madison there. It really is. It's amazing to see when this medicine actually does work, and we're firmly committed to research and study, and obviously growing high CBD plants here in Leicester if we're fortunate enough to be here and be a part of the community. And as for that 2-hour trip, you'll now be able to either drive down the street or have home delivery as part of your options for treatment.
That'd be great.
Thanks, Lisa.
Thank you very much.
I just kind of have a curiosity question. When you went through your process in Washington State, I'm from Washington State. I went from Washington and moved to Colorado, and now I'm here. When you went through your process, how did it differ from the process that you had to follow here?
So every single state that you go to is dramatically different. So keeping track of all the regulations, I'm sure, as Valerio knows, it's difficult. So what I think happened is, and I don't know this for certain, but I looked at the Washington model was ahead of Massachusetts before they changed it, and Massachusetts changed it to be a little bit more similar to what they're actually doing out in Washington as far as the program. Washington has it has all the background checks, has all the, the applications are very similar. And what they do there, though, is they're going to require, it requires local support like it does here. And it's out there, they have a medical market and a recreation market. It's controlled by the Liquor Control Board, where here it's the Department of Health. How each state determines how they're going to regulate, I have no idea how they get together and do that. I know they visit. There's a lot of similarities, I would say. But they also limit, in Washington, they limit the grows to a specific size. So tier 3 is the largest grow size that you can do. And so we're at tier 3, but they have tier 1 for smaller size ones, tier 2 for the middle size, and tier 3 for the large size. In the state of Washington, you are not allowed to have a producer processor license and a dispensing license.
Right.
Here in the state of Massachusetts, you're required to have all 3. And in fact, in Massachusetts, I think you're required to have delivery as well, to some degree, or you can. Whereas in the state of Washington, it's illegal to do that.
So here, the requirements and the regulations are a little stricter, would you say?
I would say it's a more mature process out there because they've been doing it longer. They are actually getting rid, so they have 2 different, they have medical and they have the adult use. The adult use is probably, they're eliminating the medical component because it's not as well regulated out there as the adult use. And so I think you're going to see that we're going to have a lot of, whoever has the most compliant, the most regulated environment is what is going to win out. And so we have testing out there. Everything that we produce has to go to a lab. Everything that we package has to be barcoded, labeled, identified. So the seed to sale tracking part of this is pretty much the same. You are responsible for absolutely everything that you grow, produce, and sell.
Okay, so you would follow the same here.
There's a lot of similarities in that respect, yeah.
And by the way, the Denver, they do have the neon signs. I'm familiar with it.
Prohibited here, absolutely.
Thank you.
And just quickly to follow up, so in 2012, the voters passed a 5-page law. And then in 2013, the Department of Public Health and the Public Health Council held listening sessions throughout the Commonwealth, 3 main ones. They also took written comment. The Mass Medical Society chimed in 25,000 doctors and medical students on making sure that it's a well-regulated program. A couple of the key changes they did there, they used to call them treatment centers. Now they've taken that out and they've changed it to registered marijuana dispensaries. But more importantly, the Mass Medical Society chimed in and made sure that patients have to have an ongoing relationship with their doctor. Their doctor has to review the patient's complete medical history. And so it really made it so it's much more of a legitimate program in Massachusetts. And they're, throughout those listening sessions and throughout the written comments and throughout the Mass Medical Society chiming in, they really evolved it, and then that's when they put 50-plus pages of regulations implementing the 5-page law. And they definitely took to heart the advice of doctors when they were doing that, and in changing the actual name of the dispensaries to changing the relationship that patients had to have with their doctors. So that's how we came up with this extremely regulated model that we have here. It wasn't just simply the voters passed it all. It evolved a lot since then in that year of 2013.
Good evening and welcome to Leicester. But I have a couple questions. First of all, you had mentioned the delivery service, and just a little, they explained their security system as far as the dispensary part of it, and I was just wondering what kind of security as far as your delivery service?
I'm sorry.
The delivery service, the home delivery service that you mentioned, what kind of security measures would be, or what does that entail?
Well, I don't want to go into all the security procedures that we have for home delivery service, but let me say this. It would not be the same vehicle every month. Vehicle has to be equipped with a lockdown device.
Okay.
2 people have to be in the vehicle, 1 at all times. And there are some other security procedures that we're going to use. Again, when we get to the house, or to the address that we're supposed to deliver it to, we have to see either a caregiver card and the patient's medical marijuana ID card. We have to ensure that the patient is in the house. And that product has to be signed for. So it's a pretty extensive process.
Thank you.
So Healthy Farms will also be doing deliveries to local patients. So if somebody has a condition that doesn't allow them to access the dispensary, MS or some other debilitating condition and can't get there, Healthy Farms will be doing delivery as well. The delivery security requirements and the regulations are extensive. You have to have 2 people in the car at all times. You have to have live GPS monitoring to that vehicle at all times. You have to have a live phone or radio connection to the point of origin from the cannabis. You have to plan your route ahead of time, but you can't have the same route every time. So you have to plan your route ahead of time. If you deviate from your route for any reason, you have to inform the Department of Public Health and local law enforcement within 24 hours. Once you get there, you actually can't even use a smartphone or a tablet to actually do the delivery. You have to have a laptop with an internet connection so that you can complete that dual entry into your seed-to-sale tracking program as well as into the Department of Public Health database. You'll review both forms of identification as if they were there in the dispensary. You won't be able to carry any large amounts of cash. Any cash that you take will be dropped into a drop box that's secured and bolted or welded into the vehicle. The delivery vehicle will be something like a Suburban or a Tahoe or potentially a van that's unmarked. No one's going to know. So the delivery precautions and the security that went behind them are just as extensive as the rest of the security I was talking about when somebody gets there. They thought this thing out. And, you know, I tried to petition them. I was like, can't we have, you know, at least a tablet? Let's make it easy on the security. Nope. Right now, you have to do it via a laptop. So the person who leaves the car has to actually carry a laptop with them to enter this information. It's all the internet connection is over SSL, so it's completely secured. I mean, it goes on and on and on, the level of security. So Healthy Farms will also deliver to patients who are unable to access the dispensary themselves, and they'll do it with these incredibly secured procedures. So I hope that helps to sum them up.
Yes, it does. Thank you. I know it's a very regulated industry, and honestly, I think there's room for both of you in town. So.
Good evening. What type of time frame are we talking about in terms of these businesses coming into effect?
So, I mean, you know, it's going to be a while. Healthy Farms is beginning the cultivation build out now. So, you know, I would think that, you know, speaking, you know, with all best case scenario, sometime in the first quarter of next year, but that is an incredibly aggressive time frame for cultivation. So you build out your facility, then you have to grow. And there was a discussion earlier about growing from seed. Currently, the regulatory requirement requires each company to grow from seed as opposed to growing from cuttings or clones. If you grow from seed, you're looking at, you know, a minimum of a 4-month process from when you put the seeds in the ground. There actually is a petition right now in front of the Department of Public Health by other dispensaries and ones that are opening up in the Commonwealth Dispensers Association to allow the dispensaries to buy clones from existing dispensaries. So instead of growing from seed, you'll have that head start of about a month. But we build out we build out this giant cultivation facility. Then we actually have to cultivate the product. So that, you know, that we're adding another 3 to 5, 6 months, including extraction and drying and curing and all that. So an incredibly aggressive date is first quarter of next year. Although, you know, I'd be sort of surprised if it really worked out like that quickly. But that's what we're going for.
Okay. Another question: are other abutting towns considering, like Spencer, Auburn, things like that? I mean, is there danger of oversaturation of the market and suddenly you open up a place and then it closes, kind of scenario? Or I mean,
so certainly we know Worcester sort of famously is allowing at least one group in. I think most towns in the Commonwealth have groups petitioning them. Whether those groups, like I said, you know, there were 181 applications, there's 6 open today. So, and that was, you know, in the 2013, it was August of 2013 that all started. So, yes, I think most towns are at least entertaining groups to speak with them. As far as oversaturation, there are hundreds of medical dispensaries in Denver alone. There are 5 million people in the state of Colorado. There's 6.8 million people in the Commonwealth. So even if 100 get cited, and that's years away, we're nowhere at the point where we're going to be saturated and these businesses are going to be opening and closing, because there just isn't that, the regulatory process and the vertically integrated model and the hurdles and the cost that it goes through to actually do cultivation, processing, and retail all within the same company are such that there aren't going to be enough of these open anywhere in the next bunch of years to actually saturate the market. Would you agree, Rob?
Yeah, I agree with that as well. I mean, the other thing you got to remember here in Massachusetts is everybody's vertically integrated too, and that's going to help control, I mean, competition to some degree and supply. So I think we are years, if you look at Colorado, if you look at Washington, you look at California, we are years and years away from even getting close to that.
And just the last question was, are the requirements in terms of particular sightings, like not being in a residential neighborhood, hold for both a dispensary versus a growing facility? And
so the residential requirement is not one that's in the Department of Public Health regulations. The Department of Public Regulations require that a dispensary not be within 500 feet of a place children commonly congregate. What's a place children commonly congregate? It's certainly a school. It's definitely a daycare. It's not necessarily a church if they don't have a daycare, and it isn't an ice cream shop. So, and that's the rule for all RMDs, whether it's cultivation, processing, or the retail portion or the dispensing portion of it. Now, that being said, individual zoning bylaws have amended those rules, and you can make that number lower, you can make it higher, you can add residential, you can add places of worship, and so individual zoning bylaws have attacked that. I believe your bylaw has a 1,000-foot setback from residential, and so that's something that we have to comply with given the nature. That's what passed by 2/3 vote at your annual town meeting. So even though it's actually far more strict than the Department of Public Health, 500 feet from places children commonly congregate, we have to comply with the Leicester bylaw of 1,000 feet from residential. So it's a function of both the state regulations and the individual municipal regulations.
Yeah, and I would just add, I think both of the groups here would agree that we're fully going to comply with every zoning bylaw that the town has. And again, there's two mechanisms. You have the zoning bylaw, but neither one of us move forward without that letter of support or non-opposition from the select board. So there are safeguards in place to make sure that the town is providing. Neither one of us move to the next step if we don't get that letter of support or non-opposition.
I know you said that you were looking at, you didn't have a specific site necessarily, but I thought there was talk. I live just off of Huntoon Highway off of Clark Street, and there's an old business there that corrugated cardboard or something like that. And I know the zoning there is not strictly residential, but obviously residential is well within 1,000 feet of that particular facility. So I didn't know if the zoning trumps the...
Yeah, I mean, I think you talked about the property on the corner. There's another group that was looking at that. That's not one of the locations we're looking at.
Okay, thank you.
I just want to clarify that the setback is from residential zoning districts, not from houses. And it's also 1,000 feet from a range of other uses, childcare, parks, playground, drug or alcohol rehab facilities, or other medical marijuana treatment centers. There is under consideration an amendment of those buffers. The planning board will be having a hearing next Tuesday to consider reducing the buffers for registered marijuana dispensaries that do not have on-site sales. So there is consideration of reduction of those buffers from residential districts. It's not passed yet. The hearing is next week, and then it would go before town meeting. Is that May 3rd, I believe? Yes. Sorry. I'm Michelle Buck, the town planner. I just wanted to clarify that point.
And just to follow up on that, Healthy Farms, the location does comply with that zoning. So we found a spot that we believe complies with that 1,000-foot currently. So I hope that helps.
My property does abut one of the locations on Huntoon that had been considered. I know that you would ask some questions regarding noise pollution, any other type of pollution as well. One question I had particularly is also light pollution at night. Obviously, if you're going to have security cameras, you're going to need to be able to see what's on the camera, But I'm just curious, like, as to how much, because for me, I'm concerned about that.
Randy, you can talk about the camera systems that we use, but currently, there's, we're not planning on lighting the outside of the building. We're trying to keep it as nondescript as possible. In Washington, we don't have outside lights except for at the doorways for safety for our employees, and it would be, you will notice no different light wherever we end up. It will not look any different than what you would see at any other industrial building.
And what we've worked out in other towns also is down shielding lights, so yeah, of course the camera needs a light to operate. So we down shield the lights so there's no escape of lumens from the location. That's something that we've worked out. We've spent some significant time on that in Georgetown, and we'll make sure that, all the same nuisance rules apply, right? So we don't get around any of that stuff. So if one of these came in and it was a nuisance to you in your home, I'm sure that we would be hearing about it, and frankly, you're probably going to wind up with Nat Averil's cell phone number, and you'll be able to call him and tell him that he's created a nuisance. So all the same rules apply, and we'll make sure that we deal with, down shielding or whatever it is to comply with that.
One more question. With the electrical demand the facility is going to be taking in, is there any increase in electrical rates for residents in the surrounding areas based on the increased demand? And has any study been done with the electrical company about that?
No, when we look at a location, obviously electricity is one of the important factors, so we would hire somebody to take a look and talk to the electric company. But I've never heard of the electric draw is not that significant that it should impact any demand. And if there was any impact, it would be borne by the developer. So we would actually pay for that electricity to be brought to the building if required. And I've never heard of rates going up because of increased demand on a cultivation facility.
Yeah, I haven't heard of any increased rates either, whether here or California. So I haven't heard of that, but.
Yeah, if nothing else, we're paying higher rates because it's a business, and if you're using peak rates, you're paying even more money for peak demand. So I think it'd be a good thing. Certainly, thank everyone for coming out. I'm sure these individuals will take the time to answer any questions you may have that you want to ask in front of the group, and at least Valerio has cards out here. So as Michelle said, there is some considerations being made for regulatory changes to the zoning bylaws. And those upcoming meetings will be posted on the website and blasted out as we can through our normal sources. Thanks for coming out tonight and asking our questions. Have a good evening.
Thank you all very much. Truly, I appreciate it.